Welcome to the Go Slow to Go Fast lifestyle podcast, where we explore what it truly means to live with intention, calm, and clarity in a fast-paced world. In a culture that celebrates constant momentum, speed, and relentless productivity, we don't often talk about the power of pauses, about the transitions, the in-between seasons that feel uncomfortable, uncertain, and sometimes even scary. But they're often the spaces where clarity, creativity, and real growth are born. So today's conversation invites us into that space. I'm joined by Meggi Rombach, a leader, a coach, and a guide who brings a rare depth of experience and wisdom on the topic of transitions and intentional pauses in leadership. Meggi has spent over 20 years leading teams and driving change across both the private and humanitarian sector, from global organizations like Procter & Gamble to UNICEF and the International Committee of the Red Cross. Her career has been defined by high performance, responsibility, and impact. But as so many leaders discover, consistent high performance comes at a cost. Burnout and health challenges forced Meggi to pause, and that moment changed everything. What emerged from that pause was not a step backwards, but a profound reorientation. Meggi coaches leaders and teams to navigate transitions with presence, depth, and courage, helping them find clarity and purpose in times of change without sacrificing their well-being. In this episode, we explore what it truly means to redefine success, not as doing less, but as doing what matters with intention. Well, Meggi, I just want to say thank you for coming on the Go Slow to Go Fast lifestyle podcast, and welcome.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here today.
Yes, absolutely. Before we dive into your background and all the information that you're going to be sharing with our listeners and viewers today, I'd love to start with a question for you about when you hear the phrase go slow to go fast, what does that actually mean to you personally and professionally?
It triggers so many things. I just immediately resonate with this sentence because I learned how important it is to recharge our batteries. So to go slow, to then be able to go much faster. But also immediately, I love sports analogies. So when I hear that, I immediately think things like marathon training. Like also in sports often, it's such an important concept to go slow, to build up strength slowly, to then be able to go fast. So yeah, I think it's just a fantastic line.
Yes, and I think you embody that with the work that you do for busy professionals. Can you kind of walk us through where you were in your life and how you've come to this point where you're working with other busy professionals out there?
Sure. So like many people in midlife, I've went through a few transition and changes. So I started out in marketing and brand management. And about 15 years ago, I had a burnout, my first burnout, and then took a first break. I went actually back to university, and then I went into the humanitarian field. So I've been with the Red Cross for the last 15 years. And 2 years ago, I had another burnout. And once you say, okay, one time is no time, but then if it happens again, you really start looking deeper. And that's what I did. So I worked with a psychologist. I did a lot of self-reflection. I went into mindfulness. And I think I identified a moment in my youth that got me into a habit to, when things get going and they get tough and I want to prove myself, I tend to over deliver and deliver and deliver just to hope to eventually to be seen. And I really struggled to put my boundaries firmer and stand my ground. So it really took me going back to that experience and releasing that to claiming my space. So I launched 2 years ago also a podcast, which initially was called Leadership Insights, but I rebranded it last year to Play It by Your Rules, which also is coming from this whole idea that in order to play it by our rules, we first need to understand our rules, and that's actually not so easy. And then to find our boundaries, claim our boundaries, and then we can really live more authentically. And I did notice that also with colleagues and really high level leaders, that we all have our insecurities, and even when you look really accomplished on paper, many people are struggling with that. So that's why now I'm working with midlife leaders to share, most of all, and mostly through the podcast, but also through my coaching, to really share my experience and also some practical tools to also find their boundaries and claim them better, so that they can find a more peaceful place, if you will.
Yeah, I love that you're working with midlife leaders. I'm 50. I've been a leader for 25 plus years, but even though we can, um, and I'm saying we out there to listeners and viewers who have also been in this space where you've been in middle management, maybe you've been a specialist or coordinator, whatever that's called in your corner of the world. But then when you get a promotion, it doesn't mean all of a sudden you download all of these skills that help you to lead others, so you have to, it's a process. And
Yeah.
so leadership, unless you have those supports built into your career, in your infrastructure of your business or whatever company group you're a part of, it's really learning by experience. And I think we also, obviously, we learn from our own personal experience of health related issues, stress management, all of those things. So, it's great when I hear that there are others in this profession, in this space, helping, the leaders out there now. And, if I could have had somebody like us, right, to learn from in my 20s, I think I may have, maybe not all of the things, but I think I may have been able to listen to the signs and figure them out a little quicker, than ending up in the hospital or, other,
But
situations that I've had to deal with.
it's so interesting you say that, because I've been reflecting about that a lot. Because I think there's two parts of skills that I think are useful for leaders. So one are really the hard leadership skills, and there's a whole set of things to be said about that and skills to be learned. But then is what I'm talking about more is kind of, I adjusted the famous line by Simon Sinek. It's not about what we do, but why we do it. I'm saying it's not about what we do, but how we do it. So I'm really focusing on that space. And the higher you go, the thinner the air gets and the more pressure is on you. So I think many leaders really struggle with that. But then, I mean, I wished also I would have known earlier. I would love to inspire younger people, but there's a part of me that wonders when people are ready to listen. Because just to give you a very concrete example, over 8 years ago, we had an amazing management and leadership training at work. And during that training, I first came across mindfulness. We did a few sessions. I thought like, wow, this is awesome. I should do that more often. And that never happened until I had my head full speed the second time against the wall. So I think there's also that there is a moment, we can of course share and inspire, but then I think the receptiveness comes with life experience, and life experience sometimes is hard, and sometimes we need to learn it the hard way to start really open up and listen and be open to find solutions, right?
Right. Yeah. Cause I don't really think my 20 something self would have listened. It's like you have to hit the wall. You have to be hit over the head before you're really going to listen, because you just think you can persevere and get through it.
Yeah, or you're just busy doing other things, you're like, yeah, I should do that, but right now I'm just busy doing, well, climbing the ladder, doing the exciting stuff I'm excited about, so many reasons to do other things.
Right. Right. And we can live on so much less sleep and, when we're young and not eat the best foods and all the things. And, so, life catches up to you. You're in your mid life moments now as a leader. What would be your advice to somebody out there right now who's questioning, like, what do I need to do differently? Because obviously this is not working, whatever it is that I'm doing.
So what I noticed that I drilled it down to three things that I think many people are lacking. And then there's also a few things that people aspire to, which of course is different. But I focus in my work on three specific ones that I believe, I mean, they're super important to me, and I like to work with people that can relate to those three. So I'll give you the two sets of three. So I noticed often leaders or anybody, not just leaders, like clarity, confidence, and courage. And what I mean by that is, actually, I've seen surveys by that Gallup and other studies that say it was like 65% or even more of employees are unhappy with their job, but many don't know what else they want. And that's a problem. So if you just know you're not happy, but you don't know what would make you happier, there's a saying by Seneca, if you don't know where you're going, you cannot have good trade winds to get you there. So I really believe first people need to pause, and that's why go slow to go fast is such a great line. So people need to slow down, get out of the hamster wheel, and just really sincerely reflect honestly with themselves. So what would I actually like? What would be a perfect life or a nicer or better life for me? So that's the first step. And then once you figure that out, especially at midlife, when you already build a career, then you might figure out, actually, I'd much rather be a gardener, or maybe not extreme, but I'd rather work in a different field. Then the whole lack of confidence and courage comes in, because of course it's scary. And then you go like, yeah, but I don't want to start from scratch. What if I don't have the skills? You have the whole inner critic that kicks in. So that's where we all need to build courage and confidence to take the leap and to go. And then of course with that you need a whole set of other skills, and the technical things. I mean, the typical career and transition coaching. I mean, there's of course a whole field and a whole army of coaches out there that offer that service, where you really go down into what are your skill sets, how you can transfer it. But even knowing that won't make you move unless you build up your confidence and courage, because else you might just get stuck in not moving. And then the bit I'm driving towards is, my tagline is freedom, fun, and flow. No, freedom, flow, and fun. But anyway, the three of them, I find them so important. I also, it doesn't necessarily mean to change your job. If you manage to bring that back into your job, even better.
Yeah. And would you connect the dots to purpose or values to kind of come to that understanding of that freedom and the flow and the fun?
I think it's very different for instance, starting with freedom, what freedom means for each of us. For some, freedom is flexibility of work arrangements. For others, freedom is the freedom of how you use your time. For others, maybe freedom of speech. So I think it's also to really dissect what is it that you're after. So I think that's the first point where to start. And also some people, they might not care about freedom, flow, and fun. I mean, that's just what I'm driving after. So for people, it might be status or social security, and there is no better or worse thing we want. We just need to get clear what is that we want, and then we can start going after it.
So once people figure out that driver, whatever they're looking for, I think in the pandemic, a lot of people had that forced pause. And so they may have something in the back of their mind if they haven't spent time thinking about it since. So do you have any strategies or, processes that you work through with people to kind of figure out what that is?
Yeah. So I invented a framework like most coaches do, and then come with fancy names. So I'm fine-tuning them right now. So the overall process I call my mindful rebellion approach. Because, and when I say rebellion, it's not a rebellion against the employer or whatever. It's actually rebellion against the old script, like this old stories that have been running us. So to break free from that. So that's the overall method. And then I zoom in on a framework that I call GIFT. And GIFT stands for, the G is, get clear, but the C wasn't so good, so I made it a get clear. But the first step is really about clarity. Then the second step is imagine. And that's where techniques from visualization are extremely important. And I've really gotten myself into the neuroscience of it, sophrology, a bit of neurolinguistic programming. I'm not certified on any of that, but I read up a lot of the stuff. And it all comes down to the power of visualization, and not because magically the universe sends you something. Maybe it does, but even if you don't believe in that, there's neuroscience behind it. Because the more you visualize with all your senses and you get really clear of the image of what you want, it's almost like an instruction to your subconscious that you look out for it more. The old story that when you're pregnant, for instance, suddenly you see pregnant women everywhere. I mean, they were there before. It's just because it wasn't relevant to you, you didn't see them. So similarly, that's why visualization is so powerful. Then the next step is follow through. The F is follow through. So once you basically, I mean, one exercise I do, for instance, a 3-year perfect day from now in 3 years time visualization. So I let my clients really imagine with all their senses, how would this perfect ordinary day look like 3 years from now? And then I break it back to end of this year, or maybe like into smaller chunks. And then you can work on a strategy of follow up, like little steps that they can start taking today to get towards that longer goal. And then the T is trust, because at one point you just got to surrender and trust that you'll get there, because the path might change, you might go on a detour, but just kind of keeping the faith that you'll get there is such an important thing. And it's not easy, but the more we get discouraged, the more we maybe stop too early. So building that trust, that's really an important element as well.
Yeah, thank you for walking us through that, because I think, some people might think, I definitely need to do something different. Whatever I'm doing is not working. And I don't really have time to go find a self-help book and read and figure out, whatever. But I think, listening to podcasts these days seem to be the place to go, where, lots of people can, listen for an hour and get a strategy and run with it. But, then there's human nature, and we try something and maybe it doesn't work the first time. So what would you say is the benefit of working with a coach to kind of walk through a process like you've just shared?
But the biggest one is to hold yourself accountable. I think that's a really big one. I mean, there are other ways to do that. Like, for instance, when I started getting into marathon running, it's also like public announcements, that to say on social media, I'm going to run a marathon, these things that also put pressure on yourself. But I feel like with the more personal things, you don't want to put that on social media. At least I don't want to. So I think it's more of a safe, protected space where you're gently held accountable. And also just feeding back your thoughts. If you just keep going yourself or you write it down, it can be so powerful. Because I mean, the hardest bit is the famous blind spots, like the parts that we don't know we don't know. And give you a really funny, stupid little example. When I was leaving my first corporate job after that first burnout, and I was kind of checking out, but I thought, let's get a bit of feedback. So I was asking a lot of colleagues to give 3 words that they feel I really stand for. And I knew a few things. I'm a people person, I'm this, I'm that. So I had a few ideas. Everybody said passion. And I hadn't even thought of it. It wasn't even on my radar. And now looking back, it's just ridiculous that it wasn't on my radar. But sometimes, we don't see the most obvious things. And that's something a coach can give, because a coach is not going to give you the solution. A coach is helping you with your thinking. But still, a coach also can feed you back and kind of mirror back what you're saying in other words. And that alone can sometimes trigger some insights.
Yeah. And I think, anybody out there listening to a podcast or watching us on YouTube, and if you haven't worked with a coach before and you're kind of wondering, like, well, how does it work? It's exactly what Meggi just shared. we support, coaches support your thinking. And so it's not that we're giving you ideas. We're not giving you the answer. Now, we can definitely support you with options to consider, like Meggi's process for, the gift. That is a strategy. So that's an option to consider. But coaching really, when it's done effectively, it's supporting your thinking. The client, you have the answer. You just have to see the dots connect. But it's also good to have that accountability partner like you shared, because, I've seen recently some people are using Chat GPT as their accountability partner, which, I'm okay with them throwing something in there, like what might be my first place to start. But if you really want that human connection and an accountability partner, maybe somebody who doesn't know you, like not a family member, you know, but would be gentle in the way that they guide you. Coaching is an option.
That opens a whole Pandora's box. I'm so
Right?
biased about AI. I mean, it's great. I'm using it. There's a lot of great uses of it. But in that coaching space, I feel it's so dangerous because there's also a positivity bias. And I read also that for teenagers, it can be really hard because it's such a nice friend that never challenges you. And sometimes that's the best gift a coach can give you, is to call you out, to spot the things that are purely human, that are really between the lines, that it's not even what you say, but it's maybe the incoherence between what you say and what happens in your body. And these things, until right now, I think A can't do. Maybe at one point it will be able to do it. But yes, it's a fine line to walk.
Mm-hmm. That's a fair point, because, and I've read something recently where ChatGPT is seen as like the positive cheerleader, and Gemini is more of like the analytical, so they each have their own tone. So it depends on what you're looking for. So it's interesting. It's kind of like when you go shop, get a second opinion from a medical professional, you might want different tone, different treatment, but, you know, AI, it's definitely not the place where you're going to get that real accountability, um,
And I
mirrored
think
back
there's
to you.
another element to it. A lot of this takes time because, most coaches have coaches. So I've just come out of a 1-year coaching program. And, it's taken a year for me to get full clarity. And, sometimes these things require the time. And we're these days, we always want to have answers quickly. But sometimes we have to spend time. There's actually a really good book for listeners. I really recommend reading it, particularly if they're going through a life transition. It's called Transitions, and it's written by William Bridges. And what William Bridges talks about is that in each transition, you have an ending, a neutral zone, and only then you have a new beginning. So first of all, you really have to mark the ending. It's really important to close the circle. You have to mark your ending. And then what people tend to do, they rush through the neutral zone because they just want to get out of there and start something new. But actually, the neutral zone is where the magic happens. And that's again the go slow to go fast. That's where you can reflect, where you can unpack. And there's a risk these days because we are so fast and we want to have answers fast, and ChatGPT is giving us the answers in a split second. That doesn't replace the deep reflection and the sitting on it, and that just embracing the questions and just staying there for a few weeks. It's really important to do that too.
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of in that world where we want to consume and download immediately. I'm one of those people that gets frustrated when I find a series and I can't watch more than one episode a week, at a time. But, it's, that's for, you know, brainless consumption. But if you're really wanting to work on your growth edges, yeah, I think, like you said, coaches have coaches. I definitely have coaches in my space and my accountability partners that are going to call me on things, and they're going to say, okay, last time we met, what did we say we were going to do? And where are we with that? And, it's helpful to have somebody that's checking in and giving back to you what you said you were going to do.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So thinking about, and you said it's very easy for us to kind of want to transition and move on quickly without processing. So processing is very important for us to do, whether it be a change in our life personally or professionally. So what advice do you have to people out there listening and watching who are going through maybe job loss or a transition that's pretty major in their middle years? What would be some advice that you'd want to share for them to kind of process and sit with it?
Yeah, so I'm based in Geneva, and over the last year or so, we've seen a lot of. I mean, there are many job losses here due to because there's the UN headquarters is here, the European headquarters. So there's a lot of. So I see all around me many people who went through some really serious situations where they lost their job overnight. So first of all, there's the emotional side of it. This is hard. And it's okay to feel whatever you feel, to feel angry or sad or scared. I think it's very important to embrace and accept those feelings, but don't get stuck there. But, allow them and let them out. But then move on. And as scary as it is, because right now the challenge is people in the private sector want to go into the humanitarian development sector, people in the humanitarian development sector want to go into the private sector, but everybody jobs are cut. So where do you go? And that's a super scary situation. So again, it comes back also to the trust and it's almost a little bit where actually mindfulness is so useful in all of this, because, to kind of calm your mind and really then start looking objectively, what are my skills? What are my assets? There's another really good book. I'm a book person. It's actually written by the founders of LinkedIn. It's called Startup of You. And a lot of it is probably common advice that people heard before. But what I really like when they talk about your assets, like your skills, they talk about a magic mix. So basically, it's not just what you've done in your work before, but also what you've done in your life. So if you're a mother, you're probably a pretty good project manager, even if you don't have a project management certification. Or you're singing a choir and that gives you certain skills, to really look at your whole life. And then again, go back of what do you actually want to do next? Because maybe that is the moment to make a change you wanted to do for many years. And yes, it's scary, and depending also on how much pressure there is financially and how much you can keep going without really running into trouble. But it can be an opportunity to redirect. Because the other thing I noticed, so when I did my career change 15 years ago from the private sector into the humanitarian sector, that was my dream job coming true. I mean, I couldn't have been happier. But now I've been okay moving on because our dreams change over our lifetime. And it doesn't mean I don't deeply appreciate the time I spent with the Red Cross. I absolutely appreciate every minute. But it's okay to do something else now. So I would really encourage listeners to embrace the emotions, allow them, but then pause and really take like a midlife assessment, if you will, and look at, okay, this is how far I've gotten. I have another, whatever, 15, 20 working years ahead of me. How do I want to use those years? Do I want to keep doing what I've been doing before? Because maybe that job loss was a gift in disguise. Maybe it was just sent to us to say, like, that's your moment to really look again and see what you want to do next.
Yes, I think that's great advice for anybody who's experiencing transition. I mean, it could be job loss. It could be you're wanting a career change because you're just not finding your passion in your day-to-day job that you've been doing for so many years, and you want something different, and you're afraid to admit it or tell your family or, you know, figure out what you're going to do next. So it's okay to explore those changes and sit with it, because you may not even realize what it could be like in 3 to 5 years from now, how different your life could be.
And that's actually another advice I often give. I'm a big fan of agile management. I mean, not that I'm trained on agile management as such, but this agile approach. We sometimes feel like we have to take a huge decision, but actually we don't. So if you don't have you are not impacted by a job cut, so you're actually just considering a change because you want to consider it. But that's a golden opportunity because you can start trying out things as a side hustle. I started coaching almost 10 years ago as a side hustle. I mean, not full speed, obviously, but this was in the making for a long time. And, you try it out a little bit, you test it if you like it, and you can do that with so many things. Maybe you do it during the weekends, maybe one evening a week, maybe during a holiday. If you have an idea or you think like, this is what I want to do, well, just try it out and do it a little bit. And maybe you come to this luxury problem that at one point your side hustle becomes so big and meaningful that it can take over the main job. And also another thing I'm so passionate about these days is the whole concept of portfolio careers. And I think it's much more of a thing in the US than that's maybe in Europe already. But if you're a midlife professional and you're sitting on 25 years of professional experience, you have so much to offer. So you can get really creative. You do maybe a little bit of fractional work here or a little bit of advisory work there. Maybe you keep a 50% of your previous job just to make sure that the bills are paid for now. And then explore. Today there's so many opportunities out there, but we need to step out of our comfort zone and out of our box and try something new.
Yeah. And I think I've experienced you know, your job is going to change. People are going to have multiple positions and careers in their lifetime. I think I used to hear about 7 different careers in your life. And I'm sure it's more than that now, just because of one, people's passions are coming to the forefront now and people are exploring that, and the pandemic. So are you seeing any patterns or changes in that? Or are you seeing a lot more people just making that choice before their
So
employers
I feel
do?
like I think I'm a tiny bit younger than you. So I'm 48. So I'm just hitting towards really the official midlife, if you will. But I see that so much with so many of my peers, like people that reached a fairly high level in the organization and then either they're disillusioned, they have a health challenge, they're just fed up with the stress. There are many reasons, but I see many people, and I really like to think about it as a midlife opportunity and not a crisis. But there are people that just realize, okay, I have so much more to give. Maybe the health challenge also made them realize I won't live forever. So maybe they're like just getting tons of money is not my biggest priority right now anymore. But then what is it? And I see that happening a lot around me. So it's maybe a midlife thing. I'm not sure if it's like a economically driven thing. Maybe it's a life stage thing. And I've become now really curious in the whole notion of fractional work because I feel like in many ways the UK or the US are a bit ahead in terms of the possibilities that are out there. Fractional work is not really a thing yet in Switzerland. But who knows, maybe in a few years' time it will be really established because I think there are more and more qualified people. It's also the generation now, it's the generation of not millennial yet, it's probably the Gen X, that come to the point where they say, okay, now it's really time to live my passion or my purpose. And this is what I have to offer, but this is also what I'm demanding. I'm not ready to come in 100% of my time. So are you ready to take me 40% or you hire somebody else who doesn't have my skills? And I think at some point, hopefully, the job market will start embracing that, to appreciate somebody's skilled at 40% rather than, it's a mix. I don't want to discredit younger people. Of course, there needs to be space for younger people coming up, but there could be a really beautiful mix, even for companies where you have senior staff part-time giving more of, an advisory role perhaps, and you have the youngsters coming up and really, getting the things going. That could be a beautiful model.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that working in so many ways. I mean, you see that maybe not organically, but it happens when in some spaces where you'll have somebody go on leave and then somebody who's retired come in and kind of do, we call it a 120-day contract here in the US, or at least in public schools. I don't know what they call it in other countries or other fields, but you have those people out there who still want to come and provide their knowledge and their calm, guidance, and they have so much experience to give. So I would love to see that model in more spaces, because it's like the sage on the stage, guide on the side. You can totally, collaborate and learn from the mentors out there that have had those, 30, 40 years of experience in their career. Yeah.
Absolutely.
hmm So from this point forward, are you thinking that this model, your gift and your freedom, flow, and fun, is it going to be something that you're doing in a larger scale?
Yeah, so I'm really, this year for me is the year when I see how far I can go with this and how many people I can reach with this, and also how. Because part of what I want to offer, what I'm going to offer, and what I'm already tested in a few smaller setups. Yeah, I want to bring people back to connect with themselves and with nature. So there's a lot of experiential things I want to do. I want to get them in their bodies. And the way I'm doing that is through horse assisted coaching and through really adventure style coaching. So one approach is to take them on a climbing wall and let them, so I did that the other day with my kids, and it was so scary and it was so insightful. That's why I'm also want to offer it to leaders. It's one of those climbing walls where you're self-secured. And what it means is the second you let go, there's a split second where you feel like you're in a free fall. And I'm a pretty good climber. And I swear every time I was up there, I had to go in my head, 3, 2, 1, go, because I was so scared to let go. And I think that's so a powerful analogy, because you really feel that fear in your body and you overcome it. And that is a nice insight to then also bring into your professional life. So this is something I'm offering in Switzerland. But for my broader coaching, that's a program that is, that can be run online, where I want to find the right people that connect with the spirit, and they could be based anywhere. And then the idea is to run a mix of individual coaching and pod based learning. So yeah, that's the plan. This year's the year to go big on that, and let's see how big is.
Yes, I love that. Yep. Dream big. You just never know where it's going to go. So I think that's a great resource, especially for leaders in Switzerland and anybody online who's watching and listening. I just was kind of, as you were speaking about your plans for this year, I'm thinking how grateful I am that I can connect with you and, across the pond and, in another country. And it's just, this is really a neat time that we're living in, where we can really have that online community and connect and collaborate and learn together. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And for that, I feel, as you said, podcasts are such a powerful tool these days, because of course it doesn't replace a real one-to-one coaching session, but it can spark some inspiration, maybe one or two concrete little things people can do right away. And that by itself is already really helpful.
Yes. Because I think besides the, finding the fun and, figuring out your flow, whatever your passion, is. And, I think it leads to that purpose of what, drives you. I think you also need that community and connecting with others and not just AI.
Yes. And I think that will be even more important going ahead, because of AI, and we'll all use it, and it's great. But I think it'll probably, really make us go much more technology and balance that out. You will put much more intention on also connecting with real people in real life with real conversations. So I think we have
Yeah.
to do both.
Absolutely. So, Meggi, do you have any final thoughts or words for the listeners and viewers out there before I let you go?
Maybe just if they got hooked with my idea, my vision, check out my podcast, Played by Your Rules, and tune in. And if all of this resonates, reach out to me on LinkedIn and see what's possible, or even just connect and have a chat. I just love connecting with people in any case.
Yes. And I'll make sure all information's in the show notes so people know where to find you. Thank you, Meggi, for joining us today.
Thank you very much. It's been such a pleasure being here.
This conversation is such a powerful reminder that slowing down is not a failure. It's often the most courageous and strategic choice we can make. For those listening out there and watching on YouTube, I hope this episode gave you permission to reflect on where you might need to pause, where a transition might be inviting you to lead differently, and how redefining success could create more space for both impact and well-being. If this conversation hit a chord with you, I encourage you to sit with it, maybe even take a walk, step outside, or give yourself a few quiet moments to reflect on what's shifting in your life and your leadership. You can find more about Meggi and her work in the show notes. And as always, thank you for spending time with me in this space together. And remember, the light in me honors the light in you. And as you head into the rest of your week, make sure to let your light shine through. Go slow to go fast, and thanks for listening.